Michelle Malkin for Conservative Review. I'm interrupting your holiday weekend with a quick and friendly reminder. My fellow Americans, we are not celebrating the 4th of July. So stop wishing everyone a happy 4th. We don't have a day off because of a number and a month. It's Happy Independence Day. Happy birthday, America. We're celebrating the birth of our nation. We're commemorating the truly extraordinary fortitude and foresight of our founding fathers who revolted against tyranny and taxation without representation. It is our time of year to tell the America haters inside of our borders to sit down. Yeah, you, sit down, relax, have a beer, have a hot dog, and count your blessings. Oh, and if you special, delicate snowflakes out there who can't stand American patriotism and pride need advanced trigger warnings and safe spaces because of too much red, white, and blue, I have good news for you. American Airlines, Delta, United, Alaska, JetBlue, and Southwest all now have nonstop direct flights to Cuba. Go. See ya. Just remember the reason for the season. Show your pride in the USA. Happy Independence Day.
Good morning, this is Lou Benninger, and happy hot weekend to you. Leon and I are sitting up on Mount Huth trying to catch a breeze up here, but we went ahead and turned on the air conditioning because it is already sweat hogging it out here. We're out here in East Yuba County, if you're new to us today, and we're broadcasting over a good portion of 3 counties and some other portions of 3 other counties: Nevada, Placer, Sacramento, Colusa, Yuba City, or Yuba County, Sutter County, and Butte County. So if you're out there in the fringe area and you can barely hear us, a little scratchy, go to KMYCradio.com and listen live. I understand live stream's working, so you can listen live. KMYCradio.com. So you're listening to The Patriot. We used to call ourselves KMYC 1410 AM, which that's still true. But for some reason, they wanted to call ourselves The Patriot. So I just go along with the flow. You can also go, if you're anti-AM, you can go to a thing called FM and check out 104.3 if that's your pleasure. We are interested in the great state of Jefferson. And some people have been working on promoting a separation, not from the United States, but from the rest of the state of California, about 21 counties up here in the northern state. Because we lack representation, there's been all kinds of discussions at the state capitol about trying to change the way we have representation. But the easiest way to look at this is if everyone in the North State, the North 21 or 20 counties, voted, all 100% of us voted a particular way, and all our representatives at the Assembly and Senate in the state of California voted with us, and just L.A. representatives voted against us, we would never get our way. Even though our lives are 180 degrees different than the folks that live in L.A., not putting them down, we're just different. Or San Francisco, not putting them down, just different. Want to do that? Go do that. We're very different up here. We operate different, think different, and we want a different lifestyle. And we can't get that because the urban people are always voting against what we want up in the North State. Like, we don't want a sanctuary state up here in the North State, but we're going to get one because the folks down south got all the votes. So there's going to be a meeting out at Glad Tidings, I think, on the 29th to sort out some differences amongst the people of the state of Jefferson movement. You know, what happens is, if you read the book of James in the Bible, it tells why there's differences amongst us. People want to fight. It all comes down to being selfish and thinking of yourself rather than the big movement, right? Same way in America where you get selfish, think of yourself, or in the county, they say, oh, yeah, I want to serve. Yeah, I want to be supervisor. I want to be your administrator because I'm going to change this. I'm going to make this a better county. But really what happens is they serve themselves and look out for themselves and look out for the unions and screw the taxpayer. But what, and it's interesting in the state of Jefferson, what we've had in the movement, the same type of sinful tendencies amongst the state of Jefferson people about people being pissy and into themselves and backstabbing. Same stuff exactly. You know why? Because we're sinful human beings. And when I have been thinking about this last few weeks, because they asked me to sit in on the meeting on the 29th, where normally I'm sitting here, I thought, what's the problem? And the problem, and it's all just sinful. It's just sinful human beings talking one thing. They're liars. It's so interesting. If 10 things God could have said when he gave the 10 commandments, you can think, what are the 10 most important things? One of the things says, don't lie and don't covet your neighbor's stuff, right? It's amazing to me how insecure, selfish, and how caught up people are in things and money. It's just, it works against a good cause. And it makes what happened in the founding of this country so much more a miracle. That in spite of all the weirdness and warts and weirdness in the founding fathers, they pulled off an amazing launch. Now today, people like Colin Kaepernick and these people that create a video called No Country for Me, we're here, but we hate it, and we're making lots of money, but we hate it. Obviously, they didn't. I think they smoked weed during the history class, or they didn't get taught history, or they got taught some kind of twisted thing. But throughout the day today, we're going to be going till noon. I got salted through the breaks here, some clips about Independence Day. And I like what Michelle Malkin said on the intro, where it said, it isn't the 4th. And I found myself using it. It's just kind of a shortened version. We all use jargon and different ways to talk, to communicate quickly with our friends and people we work with. We use jargon. And that's a piece of jargon that undermines what the day is all about, independence. And I'm going to talk here in a second about the fact that it isn't about your personal independence. The country was never founded to achieve your personal independence. It was founded to get out from under tyranny, taxation without representation, and religious freedom for a whole country, and start a whole country based upon novel and new ideas. Not that they hadn't existed anywhere in the world, but they'd never really been tried. And if you go and look up No Country for Me, you'll see some black folks, young black folks that are saying, really, this country, I'm here, but I don't feel any attachment to this country or how it got started, because our people weren't free. And so therefore, same thing Colin Kaepernick said, I didn't realize that he's got his heritage goes back to Ghana. So he went over to Ghana, and of course, he got treated like a king over there, because even if I go to Ghana, they'd treat me nice, because that's the way people do when foreigners come. But so he's probably feeling his oats, like thinking like he's some hero over there. They don't give crap about Colin Kaepernick. As soon as he's gone, he's gone. But he went over there and strutted and stuff. And he said, well, hey, if none of my, my people, my Ghanan people were abducted from over here. The fascinating thing is, when you look at the beginning of this country and what was going on in the world was full of slaves. And it was full of all kinds of colors and flavors of people abducting other people. In fact, I was thinking this morning as I got up about slavery, and if you celebrate St. Patrick's Day, Patrick was a slave, and he was abducted from England by the Irish. I mean, it was just a part of life. It was slavery everywhere. Does it mean it was right? No, it wasn't right. But when people came to this country, they brought all their problems with them. Some were addicted to alcohol. Some may have been addicted to drugs. Some were perverts. Some were just straight up criminals. Some were a religious sort. there was a mixture. And some people brought slaves or ended up getting involved in the slave trade. But many of the slave wheelers and dealers were black folks. Nobody wants to talk about that, but that's the way it is. And it's interesting that the two nations, England and the United States, were the ones that really finally eradicated the business of slaves buying and selling people, eradicated that from not only their country, but England actually eradicated it from their kingdom, which they were a colonial power. So there's a misunderstanding of basically what happened when this country got founded. Independence Day celebrates our nation's first steps on the road to abolishing a lot of tyranny, a lot of stuff that the founders didn't like. That's why they wrote in the Declaration of Independence that all people were created equal. Why would you do that if you felt slaves were subhuman or part human? So, but these purists want to, even though the people that make these screwy videos, their lives are a mess, if they were honest. Some of them are screwed up, addicted to drugs, sleeping around. They're fouled up people. They're dishonest. They're ripoffs. But they're making these films after they slick themselves up a little bit. But they're hypocrites. But to really look at the beginning of this country in an honest, real way, the first steps of abolishing slavery were stated in the Declaration of Independence. And why would they say it that way? Because people were sizing up the fact that, and many people were religious people. And people say, well, yeah, some Christians had slaves. Yeah, probably. Just like some people today, Christian people, think they can do all kinds of manner of evil, right? So that doesn't mean the other folks are wrong. The fact is that the clergy of the United States led the independence movement and led the fight against slavery. The most radical abolitionists were all clergy people. So celebrating Independence Day celebrates a launch of a country that still is unique in the way it operates and allows people to have freedom of speech, even to say all manner of evil about somebody else. So even while slavery was a hugely profitable worldwide venture, it was opposed on moral grounds, but it took a while to eradicate it, right? Just like, for instance, murdering children is taking a while to eradicate in this country. Think about that. Some of those people on that film they made, I don't feel a part of this country, maybe they're aborting children, and those children didn't feel a part of this country either. But it's taken decades and decades to eradicate, legalize, funded abortions. The Independence Day was also the first step toward women's suffrage, or if that suffrage word is an odd word, it was giving the right to vote. In fact, in the early days of America, only white guys got to vote. Hold that thought, that were property owners. There's some logic to that, not necessarily the white part, but the fact that why would just property owners get to vote? Because they were paying all the taxes. Hello? They were like carrying the weight of the whole country. The first steps towards civil rights were made in the launch of the Declaration of Independence and the fight for independence in this country. It was the first steps towards what you might be called a new normal that now includes female astronauts and black presidents, starting with Bill Clinton. So it's interesting how you can have all kinds of blacks now salted throughout the administration, through Congress, through the Senate. Blacks making millions of dollars a year, billions of dollars a year, thousands and thousands of blacks involved in universities, attorneys, making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, but still they're victims. It's actually nuts. It's crazy. And so poor Colin Kaepernick is suffering today. He's a multimillionaire if he never works again. He should have plenty of money if he invests it properly to never have to work a day in his life. But he says, how can we truly celebrate independence on a day that intentionally robbed our ancestors of their independence? So he said, to find my independence, I went home. I thought, well, if he is lost, maybe he ought to just move over there and change Ghana and help those people be as successful as he did, since he figured out how to do that. I often think of Colin Kaepernick. I thought, man, did that guy ever get educated? It's really a sad situation. I was thinking, I watched a clip on YouTube, and it was Tucker Carlson. And Tucker Carlson was talking about Marin County. And it reminded me of the need for the state of Jefferson, and it reminded me of the hypocrisy of the liberal mindset. It wasn't too long ago that John Nicoletti on the Board of Supervisors were all hot to trot in helping Recology, or Yuba Sutter Disposal, bring multi-train loads a day of garbage from San Francisco. That would allow San Francisco to claim it was a zero-waste community, letting you feel like you're assuming that they were recycling and composting, and they were so careful about bottles and cans and foolishness and waste that they were just, in that city, when you drive over the Bay Bridge, that they were just really on top of just taking care of their business right there. But that's always been a lie. That place has always survived, San Francisco, by shipping their garbage all throughout California. And so they were trying to make a deal to ship their crap up here to Wheatland. And so when Tucker Carlson began talking about the hypocrisy of liberals, he talked about one of the richest counties. There's 58 counties in California, but this is one of the richest counties, which in the United States, there's 31 and odd counties, 3,100 and odd counties in the United States, 3,100 something, I think. But in all the counties in the United States, Marin County is one of the most rich counties in the world. The average per capita income in Marin County is $90,000. And when they talk about diversity, these liberals, they're always talking about, or zero waste, they're always talking about dumping Yuba County, their waste in Yuba County. Or diversity, that would be something that needs to happen in Yuba and Sutter County. But in Marin County, they're not very diverse. In fact, there's only 3% black people in Marin County. And so in the state of California, or for instance, in Marin County, there's only 3% blacks, and there's no low-income housing in Marin County, and they don't want any low-income housing, and they give a lot of good excuses like, well, it's going to change the atmosphere of the county, the character of the county, the history of the county. But in the state of California, there's a law that says you must have a certain amount of subsidized housing in each county to serve the poor. But liberals who made these rules in Sacramento, Republicans didn't come up with those rules. That would be liberals over the last 4 decades of dominance in California. They want to make rules for somebody else. Now, this is pure socialism or communism, where the rulers create this supposed utopia that everyone else lives by, and they want to live by a different set of rules because they're the intellectual elite. Now, you can watch what the Obamas are doing right now with as they mooched and sucked every nickel they could while they were in Washington, D.C., and made every connection they could so they don't have to live like the average person or live in those communities like the average person, or they can say, I don't want a wall, but then they build a wall around their house. So Marin County is the poster county for hypocrisy. They don't want other flavors in their county. They don't want people that are poor in their county. They don't want any refugees. Why don't we move 10,000 Somali refugees into Marin County? Because they hate Somali refugees and they don't even want to see them in the grocery store. So the hypocrisy is sort of amazing. And that is, so this whole sanctuary city, sanctuary state thing is just more of the same. Marin County doesn't want illegal aliens up there and people, criminals hanging around. They're not going to allow people living up there. They're not going to find any place to live up there. They can't afford to live up there. Same way San Francisco. San Francisco's prices of housing has pretty much pushed even a lot of people working in the .com industry or the techie industry out into other areas that commute into San Francisco. So it's all about creating a world that somebody else has to live in. The rest of the population, the little people, the small people. As the communists used to say, the proletariat. You can look that up when you get a chance. So I hope you enjoy at various spots during the show today. We're talking about, we're reflecting on Independence Day because the Independence Day happened between last week's show and this week's show. We're also going to be talking some more about pensions. I wrote a couple columns in the Territorial Dispatch. You can look at them at territorialdispatch.biz. Let's see, it's probably 2 weeks ago now. You can check all the issues. It's biz.biz, territorialdispatch.biz. I've got a lot of feedback off those articles. A lot of people have commented to me about it. They said, generally, Lou, we don't like to read about pensions. It's pretty boring, but it was shocking what was said in those articles. Well, what was shocking about it is it's the truth. I wish it wasn't the truth. I wish it was some guy that exaggerated something. But it's fascinating how politicians who claim they want to have our trust and they're going to make a better community, yet they're screwing the very taxpayers that voted them into power. We'll be right back.
I, Paul Harvey, do herewith bequeath unto you something to remember. You may not be able to quote one line from the Declaration of Independence at this moment. Henceforth, you'll always be able to quote at least one line. It's in the last paragraph where you will recall when I remind you. It says, "We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." In the Pennsylvania State House that's now called Independence Hall in Philadelphia, the best men from each of the colonies sat down together. This was a very fortunate hour in our nation's history, one of those rare occasions in the lives of men when we had greatness to spare. These were men of means, well-educated. 24 were lawyers and jurists. 9 were farmers, owners of large plantations. On June 11, a committee sat down to draw up a Declaration of Independence. We were going to tell the British fatherland no more rule by redcoats. Below the dam of ruthless foreign rule, the stream of freedom was running shallow and muddy, and we were going to light a fuse to dynamite that dam. This pact, as Burke later put it, was a partnership between the living and the dead and the yet unborn. There was no bigotry, there was no demagoguery in this group. All had shared hardships. Jefferson finished a draft of the document in 17 days. Congress adopted it in July, and so much is familiar history. But now, King George III had denounced all rebels in America as traitors. Punishment for treason was hanging. The names now so familiar to you from the several signatures on that Declaration of Independence, the names were kept secret for 6 months, for each knew the full meaning of that magnificent last paragraph in which his signature pledged his life, his fortune, and his sacred honor. 56 men placed their names beneath that pledge. 56 men knew when they signed that they were risking everything. They knew if they won this fight, the best they could expect would be years of hardship in a struggling nation. And if they lost, they'd face a hangman's rope. But they signed the pledge. And here is the documented fate of that gallant 56. Carter Braxton of Virginia, wealthy planter, trader, saw his ships swept from the seas. To pay his debts, he lost his home and all of his properties and died in rags. Thomas Lynch Jr., who signed that pledge, was a third-generation rice grower, aristocrat, large plantation owner. After he signed, his health failed. His wife and he set out for France to regain his failing health. Their ship never got to France, was never heard from again. Thomas McKean of Delaware was so harassed by the enemy that he was forced to move his family 5 times in 5 months. He served in Congress without pay, his family in poverty and in hiding. Vandals looted the properties of Ellery and Clymer and Hall and Gwinnett and Walton and Hayward and Rutledge and Middleton. Thomas Nelson Jr. of Virginia raised $2 million on his own signature to provision our allies, the French fleet. After the war, he personally paid back the loans, wiped out his entire estate, and he was never reimbursed by his government. In the final battle for Yorktown, he, Nelson, urged General Washington to fire on his, Nelson's, own home, which was occupied by Cornwallis. It was destroyed. Thomas Nelson Jr. had pledged his life, his fortune, and his sacred honor. The Hessians seized the home of Frances Hopkinson of New Jersey. Francis Lewis had his home and everything destroyed, his wife imprisoned. She died within a few months. Richard Stockton, who signed that declaration, was captured, mistreated, his health broken to the extent that he died at 51. His estate was pillaged. Thomas Hayward Jr. was captured when Charleston fell. John Hart was driven from his wife's bedside while she was dying. Their 13 children fled in all directions for their lives. His fields and grist mill were laid waste. For more than a year, he lived in forests and caves and returned home after the war to find his wife dead, his children gone, his properties gone, and he died a few weeks later of exhaustion and a broken heart. Lewis Morris saw his land destroyed, his family scattered. Philip Livingston died within a few months from the hardships of the war. John Hancock, history remembers best due to a quirk of fate rather than anything he stood for, that great sweeping signature attesting to his vanity, towers over the others, one of the wealthiest men in New England. And yet he stood outside Boston one terrible night of the war, and he said, "Burn Boston, though it makes John Hancock a beggar, if the public good requires it." So he, too, lived up to the pledge. Of the 56, few were long to survive. 5 were captured by the British and tortured before they died. 12 had their homes from Rhode Island to Charleston sacked, looted, occupied by the enemy, or burned. 2 lost their sons in the army. 1 had 2 sons captured. 9 of the 56 died in the war from its hardships or from its more merciful bullets. I don't know what impression you had of the men who met that summer in Philadelphia. But I think it's important that we remember this about them. They were not poor men. They were not wild-eyed pirates. These were men of means. They were rich men, most of them, and had enjoyed much ease and luxury in their personal living. Not hungry men, certainly not terrorists, not irresponsible malcontents, not fanatical incendiaries. These men were prosperous men, wealthy landowners. They were substantially secure in their prosperity. They had everything to lose. But they considered liberty, and this is as much as I shall say of it. They had learned that liberty is so much more important than security, that they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. And they fulfilled their pledge. They paid the price, and freedom was born.
All right. I was reading this week about actor and immigration activist George Clooney, who is a bajillionaire, not only can afford to take a vacation anywhere he wants, but he just buys a mansion anywhere he wants. One of those mansions is in Sonning, England, and another mansion is in Italy. Recently, he has moved with his wife and new twins to live in Sonning, England. But recently, because of, he's been very critical of anyone that would be opposed to complete open borders and letting anyone in the United States that desires to come to the United States, and has mocked Trump, had personal visits face-to-face with Obama, and has been a nasty critic of Trump. But he just announced he is leaving England because he doesn't feel safe there. I thought, well, you should stay there because that's the kind of country that you want U.S. to be. But now we in the U.S. have everything wrong and they have everything right. But now you feel, because you got a wife and kids, that you can't stay there, even though you have guards, like he has ex-Secret Service people that guard him. And maybe he realized that when the British government, they revised their known jihadi terrorist numbers that live in England right now from 3,000 to 23,000. Maybe that got a little too close for comfort for Mr. Clooney and his wife Amal and his twins. Also, the fascinating thing to me is, it's the lives that these people live that is so contradictory to the words that they speak. So Clooney, as I mentioned earlier, owns several homes throughout the world, so he doesn't have to stay at a hotel. Includes a massive estate at Lake Como in Italy. And Clooney has taken extensive measures to protect his home and keep it very private. And that included paying off the local mayor, Robert Pozzi, to pass a law that if anybody came close to his home, just near the property, you would get a $600 fine. Now, Clooney's probably one of these guys that feels like the homeless people have a right to come into any of our properties except his. In July of last year, there was a makeshift refugee camp that was established in Lake Como, which is where the Clooneys have this massive Italian estate. Because they couldn't get into Switzerland because the Swiss blocked off the southern border with Italy. So dozens of refugees arrived from Africa and Asian countries and were housed in tents close to the Clooney's home. That bothered the Clooneys. And so the Clooneys have found that they can come and talk their lies and their hypocrisy back in the U.S. because they can't take the heat when life turns out the way they think it should. Just let refugees run all over the place. And let terrorists in without vetting them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to transition from here. I'm going to play a clip because we have it fit. It doesn't fit perfectly here, but we have it listed here. It's a clip by Paul Harvey on hard work, and I want to play it because it fits in with what I want to talk about pensions and also homeless people that I want to tie together here in a minute. So let's listen to Paul Harvey talk about hard work.
Americans preachers tell me that there is no sermon which is looked forward to with less enthusiasm than a sermon about sin. Well, that's probably true if we're talking about a secular sermon on the subject of hard work. There is no gospel less popular than the gospel of hard work. I could ask you today
I could ask you right now to demonstrate your faith in America by handing poison to snakes, and many or most of you would. I could outline a fundamental Christian code of conduct which strictly forbids the use of stimulants or sedatives or the wearing of jewelry, and many would, willingly and without question, accept and be bound by such abstinence. Our leaders could readily rally you to fight and die for your country, as they have many times, and you would even again. But if Paul Harvey or any politician should state that our only chance for survival is to get off our dead centers and get to work, well, I'd be lucky if you'd let me finish. But I'm going to test my luck today. You see, I don't happen to be running for or from anything, and that does make a difference. The pregnant skyline of America was set in place one brick at a time. Now that represents a lot of calluses. America the Beautiful is not an accomplished fact guaranteed to remain intact. God shed his grace on thee, to be sure, but this was wasteland when God had it to himself. He handed man a hoe and said, "You want another Eden? All right, earn it." And all that's necessary for the weeds to take over again is for you and me to lay down that hoe. Now, Americans, the problem is less acute today than it has been. We're on the right track right now. But if we sit down on that track, I'm afraid we're going to get run over. We tell our young people how our country was carved out of the wilderness. No, it wasn't. Our nation was not carved out of the wilderness. Our nation was hammered and hoed and chopped and dug and sawed and clawed out of the wilderness by bare-handed men who asked nothing for nothing. America did not start out with an agricultural production that's the awe and envy of the world. It was seeded first by sod-busting farmers who fought Indians and ranchers and cold and heat and drought and bugs and flood and one another. The fruited plain sprang forth from barren acres only after they had been watered with a lot of sweat. I guess what I'm saying is that the more history I study, ours and others, the more certain I am that there is one fertilizer essential to the survival of civilization, and that fertilizer is sweat. And I don't mean perspiration. I mean the kind of steamy, streamy, salty sweat that's wrung from a man by hard physical work. Somehow, the sweat gets into the soil of a farm or a factory or a city or a state or a nation, and everything thereabouts grows tall and strong and tough enough to stand against any storm. But the day the sweat dries up, the soil dries up, and whole civilizations are buried in dust.
Now, I'm tying together a number of streams of thought here. One is on the extreme hypocrisy of those who rule over us, county administrators, politicians, assemblymen, state senators, who have a corner on rhetoric, but don't live like they want the rest of us to live. And I want to talk about the fact of us having a welfare system we would never do that with our own children. What we're doing with the welfare system in America of just keep giving kids stuff instead of asking them to go to work. So we have these systems where we don't practice it in our own lives. Amazing if we managed our personal bank account like we managed the county's money or the state's money, we would all go broke. What are we thinking? We have politicians, we have county administrators that don't even live in our counties. They're so high and mighty. Mr. Mitnick over in Sutter County, he makes so much money. Now, let me tell you, last week I talked about the difference between what people are worth and what we could afford to pay them. Some people think they're worth $1 million a year. They think they're God's gift to man. But we can't afford to pay them that. Mr. Mitnick makes so much money at Sutter County, he can afford to fly back and forth to Ventura County or thereabouts. He's what they called in the southern states carpetbagger. In other words, he found he could make a stash of money in Sutter County because he got kicked out of his last job. In fact, he's so discombobulated, he can't keep straight in his mind which jurisdiction he actually represents. At a town hall meeting down at Shanghai Bend this last week, he couldn't keep straight which jurisdiction he was speaking about because he kept misspeaking and calling Sutter County Thousand Oaks. That's a bad sign, folks. That's a real bad sign. When you hire people that don't want to live in your county or your city, that's a bad sign. We have administrators, Robert Bendorf in Yuba County, doesn't live here. We have Aaron Easton, who's chief of police of Marysville, doesn't live in the city. In fact, of 53 or 54 employees, only 3 employees in the entire city of Marysville live here. And yet they want to tell us, these people, how to run our operation. And they want to tell us we need to be tolerant of people looting our businesses and harassing people in our neighborhoods and disrupting life in our city that won't go to work and are sucking our tax dollars. They want to tell us how it ought to be, and then they fly at the end of the day down to Ventura County where there are no homeless people. I drove down to Lincoln yesterday to meet some friends of mine regarding a project we're doing in Asia, and it's interesting. There were no homeless people, nowhere to be found. It's interesting. I bet there's no homeless people to be found in Marin County either. So why are we allowing them to stay here? Now, they say to me that some federal judge said if you tell homeless people they cannot squat on public property, you got to have at least some place on public property for them to go, at least short term. I wonder if anybody's willing to fight that deal. In other words, if I come, like I met a gal in Yuba County Jail who was going to prison because she and her husband and 3 kids decided to move into a vacant home, but it was fully furnished. A lady had just gone away for a while, and they decided to move into the vacant home, and they arrested him, put him in jail, and she went to prison. But I saw in the news the other day that they interviewed a lady down the Shanghai Bend River Bottoms that had been living there for 7 years. And I looked at her on the news. I watched it on the internet, and I thought, you look healthy. She was probably in her 30s, maybe 40. And I thought, well, it's a free country. And if you want to live here, there, and everywhere, hey, I don't get up worrying about all the people, whether everybody's got a sandwich to eat in the morning. But the interesting thing was that she thought that she could just move into the river bottoms, which is county property. That means the taxpayers of Sutter County own that property and maintain that property. And they have a right to go down there and use that property, use it, not own it, not squat on it. And she thought she had a right to just make a house down there. Now, I'm telling you, if you want to try to get a house built in Sutter County, it's almost easier to get the resurrection from the dead. By the time you go through all the planning and all the fees and and get all the court documents right for the deeds to the property, everything, but yet somebody can just go and squat on property, and they got all the courts of the nation supporting them. And the Mr. Mitnick, the county administrator, tells the sheriff's department not to enforce the laws of people polluting the water. It's interesting, the double standard. The liberals will tell you how concerned they are about our water. In fact, I just saw where the Sikh temple in Terra Buena got a citation or something because all these public water wells, like at Glad Tidings where I go to church, we have to test. It's a mandatory thing to test the water to make sure you have pure water for the public to drink. So they had high nitrates, and oh my God. And so, they just, it just happens in our community. You either have to dig a deeper well, or you put a filter on the system to take it out. And so we'll mandate that the Indian folks out there at the Terra Buena place make sure they have pure water, yet we'll allow the homeless to dump all kinds of manner of stuff in the river. Yuba City will get $10,000, $5,000, $20,000 fines if their balances of chemicals are just a little off. It doesn't hurt anybody. You could probably drink the water just fine. But if it goes back in the Yuba River Feather River and it's just not perfect, they'll get an automatic $10,000, $20, not negotiable, you can't appeal it. It's just bam, you didn't manage the water well. And yet the county will allow people to go down there and dump drugs in the water, cook meth, do all kinds of manner of evil down there and trash the place. Now we spend the taxpayers. They don't even want you to know this. It's interesting when the public officials hide the facts. Because you know why people hide stuff? Because they're embarrassed about it. They know what's wrong. They're hypocrites. They're liars and they're hypocrites. So they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to clean up after people that are not changing their ways. They're just allowing them to stay there, and now we're all of a sudden, they think, oh, we're broken Sutter County. Oh, we're broken Yuba County. Then they'll turn around and spend $250,000 in a cleanup of garbage, allowing human beings to live like animals and destroy our river bottoms, and then cause people not to want to go down there because you feel like, by the way, that's where, for those that you have that lived around here, Michael Lyons was sexually assaulted, stabbed 62 times, his throat slit. That's where he was abducted and taken to from Bridge Street School, the river bottoms. So basically what Scott Mitnick, the administrator from Ventura, who flies in and makes an appearance every once in a while, and makes what, 230, 40,000 plus benefits? When you got a guy that can afford to live at the other end of the state and fly in, that's a bad sign, folks. You're paying him way too much money. He flies in from pristine Ventura County, where he lives, probably in a subdivision that they wouldn't tolerate a person walking through their little subdivision that they didn't know belonged there. They'd be calling the law enforcement in there to shake them down. But over here, in fact, I was pulling in from Lincoln yesterday. I pulled in off the East Street Bridge and turned right on 3rd Street. And a guy had his pants down right there. I used to call it 3rd and D at that park. I'm now calling it 3rd and 3rd Street because he was taking care of himself right there, had his pants down. He was naked. Right across from Jim Boy's Tacos. I thought, oh, that's an appetizing thing. People in the drive-thru and look right across there, and the guy's dropping a few right there in the park, 3rd and 3rd Streets in Marysville. I thought, this is what real tolerance looks like in the liberal mindset of Police Chief Aaron Easton. Unbelievable. Just unbelievable. So now we have people that are, if you've ever been down at Blackburn Tally Park at the corner of Burns and Garden Highway, and you go down Burns Drive, there's a loop there that goes down Burns, loops around, comes back out Epley and back out to Garden Highway. Those businesses down there are getting vandalized. You know, I wonder sometime, I'm very pro-police. In fact, if I had another go-around at it, I could live another life. I might either be a police officer half-time, a teacher the other half-time. I'd like the experience. But honestly, we're paying a fantastic amount of our budget for police and fire, and we can't get a handle and manage people that don't want to live according to our society's rules. It's something to think about, folks. We'll be right back.
America has always been the land of dreams because America is a nation of true believers. When the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth, they prayed. When the founders wrote the Declaration of Independence, they invoked our Creator 4 times. Because in America, we don't worship government, we worship God. That is why our elected officials put their hands on the Bible and say, "So help me God," as they take the oath of office. It is why our currency proudly declares, "In God we trust." And it's why we proudly proclaim that we are one nation under God every time we say the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right, welcome back. You're listening to The Patriot Live with Lou, and it's hot as hell out there today. Lay low. If you don't have any air conditioning, just jump in. I tried it the other day. I just filled my bathtub full of just the cold section and just like slipped in there, and I thought, oh, it felt good. Almost felt like I was back in my drug days. It got all euphoric and everything. I want to play you a clip in a second here. I want to introduce it first. It's about how did America get started? Like, what did people really believe? Because if you listen to the colleges that you send your kids to, they'll say all this stuff about spirituality and God, that's just a bunch of crap. And I'd just like you to think about something. There are YouTube clips that will take you on a tour of Washington, D.C. and some of the high places, the patriotic high places in our country, like the Lincoln Memorial. It's fascinating how you can go around and above all these and in these buildings and in the granite above things and on different monuments, there's all these scriptures. How did all those scriptures get there? So I'm going to play a clip to like clear the air on how this country really got started, because a lot of people are just pitching a lot of baloney out there.
What role should religion play in a free society? More and more people today would answer, none. That would not have been the answer of the founders of the United States, the men who fought the American Revolution and wrote the country's Constitution. To them, the issue of religion and freedom were inextricably linked. You couldn't have freedom without religion. In fact, the political philosophy of the founders necessitated a divine foundation. Thomas Jefferson makes this clear in the Declaration of Independence when he writes that all men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. The purpose of government, Jefferson and his compatriots believed, was not to bestow rights. Rather, it was to protect those rights already endowed upon human beings by God. But government isn't enough for a free society. A moral people is also required. That is, a people moral enough to police itself. Virtue or morality, George Washington observed, is a necessary spring of popular government. Thus, for the founders, liberty was not merely the ability to do what one wanted. It came with moral demands and boundaries. They all accepted the rule of life expressed by Benjamin Franklin. Nothing brings more pain than too much pleasure, nothing more bondage than too much liberty. The founders knew that the absolute enemy of freedom was, ironically, a freedom that was absolute and unrestrained. And where was this restraint going to come from? Their answer was religion, which for them, because of when and where they lived, was some variety of Christianity. Let divines and philosophers, statesmen and patriots unite, Samuel Adams wrote, in instructing citizens in the art of self-government. In short, of leading them in the study and practice of the exalted virtues of the Christian system. The Christian system to which Adams refers is composed of Judeo-Christian values, the values rooted in the Old and New Testaments, both of which were referred to by the founders with equal conviction and frequency. Jefferson, yes, the very same Thomas Jefferson who is so often portrayed as anti-religious, confirmed this sentiment in his notes on the state of Virginia, when he asked, "Can the liberties of a nation be thought secure when we have removed their only firm basis, a conviction in the minds of the people that these liberties are the gift of God? and that they are not to be violated but with his wrath? James Madison likewise affirmed the essential connection between religion and morality. The belief in a God all-powerful, wise, and good is essential to the moral order of the world and to the happiness of man. John Adams believed that the doctrine of a supreme, intelligent, wise, almighty sovereign of the universe, a doctrine he credited to Judaism, was the great essential principle of all morality and consequently of all civilization. And he applied this thinking specifically to the new nation he helped to create. Our Constitution, he said, was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. As president, he replied to a letter from university students in a way that would surprise many today. Science, liberty, and religion have an inseparable union. Without their joint influence, no society can be great, flourishing, or happy. Meanwhile, another founder, Alexander Hamilton, looked at the French Revolution and saw something much different. That revolution, unlike the American Revolution, had devolved into violence and chaos. Hamilton believed he understood why. The anti-religious force it unleashed, he wrote, annihilates the foundations of social order and true liberty, confounds all moral distinctions, and substitutes for the mild and beneficent religion of the gospel a gloomy, persecuting, and desolating atheism. For the founders, a free society divorced from religion simply could not work and would not survive. It is no wonder then that in his farewell address, George Washington chastised those who would claim to be patriots and yet undermine the influence of religion. Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. In vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness, these firmest props of the duties of men and citizens. The founders did not demand that anyone believe in any particular religion or even in God. Quite the contrary. But while they understood the value of a secular government, they feared a secular society, one without religion. So should we. I'm Joshua Charles, writer and researcher at the Museum of the Bible for Prager University.
All right, so you may not be involved in church, but what he just said has huge implications, and it always has had huge implication. Whether you were raised like I was not raised, a church guy, or with any belief system that had Jesus or Christianity labels on it. However, my family, my parents, practiced some of the virtues of the faith without calling it the faith. It was a part of their upbringing, like hard work, like honesty, like not cheating, stealing, lying, right? I'm not saying they never did that, but as far as I know, they lived a life that they took care of their own business. They paid all their bills. I've never had a person say, "Oh, your dad, he never paid his bills," or your mom, she cheated me out of something. So we take those kind of behaviors or attributes or virtues for granted. But that's what keeps our society unique and successful beyond any other society that has ever been in the world from the beginning. And so I'm always fascinated when I read portions of the Bible that I find kind of trippy. For instance, in the New Testament, this guy named Paul, he's writing to Christian people, probably new converts, right? And he's trying to teach them, because they don't have the Bible yet, the New Testament. And he's writing them letters to try to help them learn how to live a good life. And he's telling Christian people, he says, don't steal. It's interesting, isn't it? People had a habit of stealing. They have a habit. People steal today. Do you know that? In fact, you may be a thief. You think, oh, I'm not a thief. I don't break into people. Well, you might be a thief. You might, not give the right change. You might be maybe you take some money. You think, oh, the change isn't right. Oh, I'm not going to go back and deal with that. So a variety of ways, right? You might skim a little bit every once in a while. He says, quit that. Instead, go get a job and take care of your own business and have a little extra to help others, right? But we have people that proudly flip the bird to spirituality in the Bible and tell us we don't need that. We don't need that. So we have people that are serving in our public offices, politics, that are perverts, thieves, liars, cheats, and that's what we get. Because we no longer want to emphasize the importance of a spiritual accountability, a moral code. So we have people that, like the Danelle Stylos situation in Sutter County, where she signs a document, an employment document, because of the job she has that includes oversight of emergency response, that they say you must live in our community to work here. It's interesting. I think everybody ought to live in our community if they want to work here. They ought to move here and be a part of the community, because then they can experience the fruit of their decisions. So if Mr. Mitnick lives in Sutter County and he's got homeless pooping on his front porch, maybe his decision may be a little different than if he's just dropping in for a couple days a week and dealing with it like some little intellectual exercise in some kind of a thesis or seminar class, upper division seminar at Cal State University, Sacramento. So we make light of these moral standards that the founding fathers said, if we don't have these, there is no way that this system is going to prevail. This republican or republic system in a measure of democracy is going to work unless people can manage themselves. Or another way to look at it is, the Bible says we need law enforcement to keep a lid on this sucker until the Holy Spirit comes back and kicks the crap out of everybody that ain't going to live right, and the party's over and there's a new world. That's Lou Benninger's paraphrase of how this thing's going to dial in. All you anti-cops, maybe you should just say, I'm anti-God, because God didn't ever say a cop had to be perfect, but he said we're going to have law enforcement, or we're going to have military or ministers that will keep things in order until there's a different administration where Jesus is running the show. They think, oh, well, I'm not into all that. You don't have to be into all that to be, like, you can say, oh, I'm not into getting a sunburn, but if you lay out in the sun, you're going to get torched in a day like this. So when we allow people to violate the law, like in the city of Marysville, I call the city of Marysville now Oliverst with curbs and gutters, because that's what's happening, because the law enforcement in the city of Marysville is now not enforcing numerous laws of deviant behavior and violation of codes and ordinances on stashing broke down cars, trailers. I got 3 or 4 on my block. I'm just on one block. I got 2 or 3 broke down cars and 2 trailers, utility trailers. Totally against the ordinances. Police drive right by them. Don't do jack diddly about them. In Detroit, what they've done in areas that the police will not take care of business, businesses have resorted to hiring not just a security operation that isn't packing weapons, like Elite Security. They're hiring people that are packing weapons, and they're guarding these buildings, and they're shooting people. Now, honestly, folks, that's where this is headed, because at some point, like I told Dale Whitmore, the councilman in Marysville, I said, I don't mind mixing it up with homeless folks that are screwed up on LSD or meth or heroin or whatever and ain't thinking straight and doing something stupid in my yard. I'll take care of it myself. But if I had a young wife and kids and I was leaving the house to go to work, I would move out of Marysville, because it's dangerous. Now, if you think it isn't dangerous, you're just stupid. I want to remind you that a guy got beat to death at the homeless camp in the Yuba River Bottoms on right there at Simpson Lane, got beat to death with a branch. And a gal got raped down there. I met her in Yuba County Jail. So if you want to live like animals, all you have to do is invite people into the community that are living like animals, right? A lot of people take law enforcement for granted. Constantly, day in and day out, they are removing people from our community that aren't playing fair. And they're doing stupid stuff. They're doing dangerous stuff. And they're putting them in jail. And they're trying to sort out their life in there. But they're not, when they're in jail, they're not doing damage in your neighborhood, or molesting your kids, making a move on your wife. You think, oh, well, nobody's making a move on my... Listen, you're not in charge of your wife all day. When she's going to Walgreens, when she's going to CVS Pharmacy, when she's going to Walmart and she's getting hit up out there in the parking lot, you're not there. And that's happening all over the Yuba Sutter area, and nobody is doing jack about it, including some guy that can't even remember what county he's in half the time, by the name of Scott Mitnick. He doesn't know jack. He's flying back and forth. So I understand it. When I'm flying overseas and I'm in Vietnam, Laos, China, Hong Kong, I'm in all those places in a matter of a 2-week period, I forget where I am. But I'm not serving those people. I'm just traveling. And I forget, now, what money am I using here? Is it the dong? Is it the yuan? Is it the Hong Kong dollar? Is it the U.S. dollar? Is it the kip? But when we got a county administrator that can't keep where that has no sympathy for the residents and businesses that are being tormented and harassed. And, I got a guy the other day in the river bottoms. He was getting in the back of Recology, stealing cans out of Recology, going around the front, selling them back to them. Listen, people, you think people living in the river bottoms didn't have an effect on this community? They're stealing us blind. And they either need to, just like Paul said, he didn't say, oh, we need to find another location for them. He said, quit it. Quit stealing. Go get a job. Get into a house. Get into a rehab. Get into a homeless shelter. You're not going to be allowed to just ruin our community. But we got all the, you know what? Here, let me just tell you, you think, oh, yeah, we make jokes about being politically correct. Most of you out there, even you so-called Republicans, are so screwed up in the head on being politically correct. You don't know which direction's up. I hear Republican committees or groups or whatever that can't sort out that murdering a baby is wrong. They don't want to talk about it. I don't have any problem talking about it. I don't have any problem talking about, I think it's wrong for somebody to get stabbed to death or shot or whatever, or dismembered in the womb. It's like, why don't you get a clue? If you wonder how the state of California it got so screwed up, why don't you look in the mirror? You think, well, I'm conservative. Yeah, well, how much you been doing in the last 10 years besides just feeding your face and making $100,000 a year and taking your little vacations to Hawaii and Cabo San Lucas? And that's been your investment in this society. Let me just help you with this. If you think this society is going to stay righted and balanced and headed in the right direction, well, you just take as much money and shove it in your pocket like people like Mitnick and Bendorf and the rest of them are doing. You think it's going to turn out all right? It is not going to turn out all right. You see any of those people making an adjustment on the pensions? That any honest person that knows finances can tell you we are going broke. And the answer is not to raise taxes. Honestly, people, that is so offensive that they will not adjust that. Listen, when you look, I get, when people tell me they're going into public service, I said, please don't use that word. That's like a guy having sex with a daughter and say he really loves her. Come on, man. The people that are getting in public service, as they say, working for the county, the city, the state, and making salaries, and you pay them for 20 years, and they make darn near that salary for the rest of their life, plus health? That's public service? That is not public service. The public can't afford you. The public can't afford you. But politicians are so blinded by self-interest and self-serving and kicking the can down the road because they don't have the backbone and the Spaldings to make a hard right choice for the benefit of their constituents who voted for them. They tell the constituents one thing to get their vote, and then they sit on those behind those dais, and they vote to support the politicians and the unions and the special interests. Screw the public. And I'll challenge any of those politicians to why don't you write a opinion piece for the Territorial Dispatch and put your stuff out there so we can examine it. This whole pension thing, and after this break, I'm going to describe to you how the public has been lied to, scammed, and ripped off by the very people that swore to take care of you and to cover for you and to make sure this county was a peaceful place and a secure place to live, these cities and counties. They have scammed, ripped off, and exposed you to danger. I'll be right back.
The Declaration of Independence. It's America's birth certificate. And the principles of the Declaration is what was placed into the Constitution of the United States. The Declaration formed the body, the basis, the foundation for our American form of government. It's unfortunate that in recent years, so many Americans no longer know anything about our documents. And that's why a number of states across the United States have passed bills to have students recite the most famous 56 words of our national birth certificate. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. 56 remarkable words. Louisiana decided they wanted to be one of those states that were having students learn the Declaration, so State Representative Valerie Hodges introduced a bill for students to recite that part of the Declaration. But State Representative Barbara Norton objected to that, said the Declaration is not true. She said those principles weren't true, and said it wasn't until the time of Dr. Martin Luther King that those principles and that equality came. Time out. Dr. Martin Luther King, in his I Have a Dream speech, he quoted those 56 words there in Washington, D.C. He believed those words. He believed the Declaration was true, and so did other black civil rights leaders. For example, Frederick Douglass said we should learn the Declaration, that it contained the right principles. And this is Henry Highland Garnett, the first black man to officially speak in Congress. When they abolished slavery in the 13th Amendment, Congress asked him to give a sermon on that occasion. He praises the Declaration of Independence and its principles. It's interesting that black civil rights leaders for 2 centuries have praised the Declaration of Independence. And now we have folks today who know so little about our history that they think the Declaration is a bad document, and they don't want kids to know the Declaration. This is why it's important for every single American to know the principles of the Declaration of Independence.
And what has gotten into Russia's top athlete? Needles, apparently, but more on that later as we yield for breaking news. Ed? Thank you. Breaking news that's horribly tragic. If your children are watching, we warn you it's graphic. Our lead story tonight atop the report was Donald Trump eating chicken with a knife and a fork. Plus, this Trump supporter is 11 years old. So what are his thoughts on? Are you reading the scroll? Who he thinks is best fit to lead us? Would he have voted for Obamacare when he was a fetus? I really don't mean to step on your staging, but it seems like there's war. Some battles are raging. Reporting the news. Is that not our vow? You know what? You're right. I'll cover it now. Well, the war continues. Yes. On Twitter as planned. Between Donald Trump and a Littleton man. The fighting is fierce. No sight of the end. Follow it all on our app. You're watching CNN. What I mean is while we're reading these trivial mysteries, people are dying. We're losing our liberties. They're inside our what? Isn't that banned? Inside our hardware. I understand. Well, they could be in your phone at this very moment. Yes, Pokemons. This town's Pokemon going. Plus, expensive beer. How hoppy's the taste? Fareed Zakaria will copy and paste. Look, I really just think that there's stuff that we missed. Like, holy crap, is that true? Does that list exist? Cover the news. Shake up the ranks. The real news. Thanks. Well, it's a hidden document upon which fates swing. Yes, fortune cookie fortunes. Who's writing those things? A man with no parachute just took a dive in today's most newsworthy instance of one flung from the sky. I know this is tough, so forgive the belittling. Rome is engulfed and we're sitting here fiddling. Executive orders, economy stuttering. These are the stories we're sitting here covering. There's war in Afghanistan, hurt in Iraq. You need $5 footlongs for turkey this bad. Cut his mic. Breaking news. The war on whistleblowers continued today, and we'll update the condition of that Little League referee. Plus, it took the Olympics by storm. But what is it like to cup someone? Josh Duggar is in the studio.
All right, welcome back. You're listening to Live with Lou. We're talking about homelessness. Who's responsible for whom? I was raised to be responsible for myself, to take care of myself. Sometimes people need a hand up. But what's happened in this country is we've got a massive 127 different poverty funds, federal, state, not even counting the local, giveaway programs. In fact, I was just listening to a talk about Georgia. Around Atlanta, Georgia, they are progressively changing the rules on food stamps. It's a federal program, but the states have some say, particularly when the unemployment rate drops below a certain percentage. In other words, the idea is if people can go to work, they should go to work. So what they're doing is for men and women that have no children and that aren't disabled, there's all those exceptions. Like they aren't disabled, they don't have PTSD, et cetera, et cetera. That gives a lot of people an out, particularly people in the U.S. They'll arrest you for a while if you're drunk or on drugs, and then after a while they fund that. They call it disability insurance. They call it a disease. First, it's just you're stupid, then you're diseased. And so what they're doing in Georgia is they're giving you 90 days of food stamps, but then you either need to prove you're a nutcase or disabled, as long as you don't have kids, or you need to go to work or into a job program. Do you know what's happening? Do you want to take a guess? Do you want me to give you 10 seconds to think about it? Thousands of people are leaving food stamps. Why? Because they don't want to work. In other words, the food stamps they're getting isn't worth going to work for or going into a training program for. They'd rather do without. Now, recently, we've been working on a solar project out at the Church of Glad Tidings. We're doing it ourselves. We're just buying the products. And so I wanted to help out, but I didn't have time to go there myself. So I've had 3 different people that said they could use some help that I said, if you'll go there, in fact, some I would even drive them. If you go there, I will pay you myself to work in my place. None of them took me up on the job, on the deal. None of these people are invalids. These are not old people. These are young people, and they're not willing to work, but they're willing to collect money from you, the government. Now, I want to give you these figures. I think I mentioned them last week, but I'm sure the same people aren't listening all the time from week to week. So I'm going to give you the figures on what the debt is. Now, you know, whenever you see that the government says we have a balanced budget, they really don't have a balanced budget because they have what we call unfunded liabilities. And these unfunded liabilities are the pensions that they've made promises to pay, but they have no funds set aside to pay for those pensions. Like, for instance, if you have not worked for government and you didn't work in private industry where they had you a retirement plan, you had to do your own retirement plan. So when you retire, whatever money you have, and you can invest that and keep investing that or draw from it or whatever you want to do, but that's all the money you have. And so there's no debt on the business or any place you ever worked that they're responsible for you. You're responsible for yourself. But in government, we created this thing where somehow the taxpayer, in other words, it'd be one thing if the government employee set aside a portion of his or her money per year, per month, per week. And then at the end, they got all their money, and that's all they get. But politicians in an incestuous relationship with unions, government unions, have created a system where the taxpayer is on the hook after the person works 20, 25, 30 years. They're on the hook until they leave Earth to pay them 50, 60, 70, 80, 90% of their pay, of their highest pay year, including bonuses and overtime and all kinds of special things that get added on there to spike the pay up. They're responsible until they drop dead. For many people, that's another 30 years after they retire. So what you have now, for instance, right now we have a couple of DAs that are serving in our two Yuba and Sutter counties. But the fact is we probably have a number of other DAs that have retired ahead of them. So we're paying for not two DAs in Yuba and Sutter County, one in each, but we're probably paying for 2 or 3 or 4 more DAs that aren't no longer working. Now, I want to ask you, how do you think that the taxpayers can fund? It's one thing to fund your current employees, but how are you going to continue to pay their retirement? And people say, some government employees say, well, we paid into that retirement. Okay, fine. You're paying in some. But when the retirement fund runs out of money, the taxpayer has to pay you for the rest of your life. You say, well, that's what we agreed to. Yeah, I know that's what you agreed to, and it's wrong. That what you were offered is wrong. It's a ripoff on the public. In other words, you should have got whatever's there for you when you walked out to use it up as you wish throughout your retirement, and you don't get no mo. So here's what it looks like right now. I'm going to tell you how it got this bad in a second. The county of Yuba, according to pensiontracker.org, pensiontracker.org, that's not some right-wing nutcase organization. That's Stanford University's research project on the pensions in California. Pensiontracker.org, if the current pension system, CalPERS, CalSTRS, if they earn 3.25% on their investments, which they are not, they're only earning in this last year just a tad over 0.5%. Now, honestly, I just talked to a lady that handles my retirement, and she should run CalPERS, that woman. She's making some money for me. Thank God, because I never made much money. So it's nice I can do full-time volunteer work nowadays, and money is being made for me. But in the pension system, why do you think they're not making any money? I'm going to give you 2 reasons. One, corrupt people are being paid off who are making the decisions on where to invest the money, and they're investing in people that pay them kickbacks, number one. Number 2 is they're withdrawing money from any company that isn't politically correct. So like the energy, if they don't want any money in the oil business or fossil fuels. So they pull money out of there and they invest in green energy. Do you know what's happening with green energy? It's collapsing because it can't live on its own, whether it's bird blenders or solar. So let me just give you a breakdown. If we were to settle up today and you live in Yuba County, and you were to say, hey, we want our county to run in the black. We want to have a balanced budget, and we don't want to owe anybody. That means that every household in Yuba County would have to pony up about $14,500 and give it to CalPERS to get us out of debt. I want you to think about that. We have many people in Yuba County that have 2 workers in the household to generate about $30,000 for that household with 2 workers. And so, but if we wanted to clear our debt right now, we would have to come up with $14,500 per every household. Single parent households, every household. In Yuba City, it comes up to almost $10,000 per household. About $9,700 to be exact. In Marysville, all you households in Marysville, to get us out of debt, these are the who created this debt? You out there on Sicard Street? You out there at Shanghai Bend? Who created this debt? Your politicians created the debt. 3, 4, 5 votes on those different committees. They created the debt. It's just like you create your own debt. You go out and buy a $15,000, $20,000 car and you're not making enough, plus you have a house payment, you're not making enough. You created that debt. The car business didn't create that debt. The mortgage people didn't, the real estate people didn't create that debt. You created that debt. So Marysville, $9,100, almost $9,200, we'd have to come up every household, we'd have to give that to CalPERS to clear the liability we have right now. Sutter County, about $7,500 per household in Sutter County. I want you to think about that. How do you think we got there? Let me tell you two ways we really got screwed up. I'll start with Sutter County first because it's the most familiar to me because I've written about it in the last few years a couple times. In 2004, coming into 2004, if you'll remember, the economy was doing really well, right? It was booming. And Larry Combs, the administrator of Sutter County, wanted to give the department heads a raise. But in the process of doing that, they were going to give them a big raise. Like I think about 30%, 35% or something like that. And so, but in the process of doing that, he realized he could not do that without giving all the employees the same raise. And not just, he was not, you know how when the boss says, hey, I'm going to give you a raise? He usually is going to give you a raise based on the next paycheck, not retroactive for the last 10 years you worked. Now, I want you to hold that concept. Retroactive, they call it. That means I'm not only give you a raise from here on out, I'm going back and I'm going to give you this raise from the time you had your first day on the job here. So what Larry Combs did with the administrators that were all complicit in this, except for a guy named Robert Stark, who was the taxpayers' eyes on the county coffers. He's the auditor controller at that time. There's rules on how you raise these fees and taxes and pensions, and you're supposed to present the impacts of it in a public meeting to the taxpayers. They should be forewarned. They're called actuarials. In other words, it's an explanation on what the actual costs are or the financial implications to the county on all these raises. They didn't do that. Instead of even putting it as an agenda item on the budget where they bring it up, everybody can talk about it, the public can have their input, da-da-da-da-da. They didn't even do that. But in the rules, they're supposed to actually have a meeting where they explain all this in detail to the people. But instead, they put it on a consent agenda. The consent agenda is when there's about 5, 6, 7, 10, 20 items where they just have them listed at the top of the agenda, and they say, give me an amen on the consent agenda, and they vote them all in, all that forward, without discussion unless a city councilman or a supervisor wants to pull it off. They put the 35% increase retroactive to the time of employment on the consent agenda and pushed it through against the complaint of the auditor controller who picked up on it and made a scene at the supervisors meeting. That impact took us from about a $20,000, I think, a surplus to about a $110,000 deficit or a debt. That one move. And now we're a $10 million positive to about $110 or $120 million debt. Today we're at about $150 million, according to the new auditor controller Nathan Black. I was just talking to Andy Vasquez today, and he asked the county administrator what our debt is in Yuba County. He said he'd have to get back to him. I thought, you know something? If that administrator doesn't know that figure off the top of his head, he's not the kind of administrator I'd want running my job. I would know that figure from month to month if I was administrating either county. I would have that. It's the same way I'm concerned about if I have any debt at my house. If I had a $150 million debt hanging over a business I was running, that thing would plague me. I'd be able to rattle that number off. Nathan Black could drop that number in your lap any time of the day or night. I don't know what's the matter over here in Yuba County that when they say, we'll have to get back to you on that. Listen, I'll just save you. Just go to pensiontracker.org, look up Yuba County, and you can see how much per household, figure out how many households there are, multiply it out, you'll see how much we owe. That may not be current, but that's going to be close. Now, here's the deal. Here's what happened. That's what happened in Sutter County. Here's what happened in Yuba County. About the same time, Robert Bendorf made a proposal before the Board of Supervisors to give everybody a raise. Of course, it's interesting, these county administrators, when they think they need to give everybody a raise, what they do something, they talk in these very judicious, equality, in the spirit of equality type discussions. Well, you know, this county, they always compare it to other counties. This county's getting this. Well, this county's getting this. And, well, you know, just down here in Roseville, they're getting this. And Placer County's getting this. And so then they say, well, we're like 20 or 30% behind all these folks. But the discussion is never, what can the public afford? What can Yuba County citizens afford? What kind of economies in Yuba? But they say, well, you know, our people, we're not going to have anybody to work for us here. They'll all go down there and work for them. But they never really give everybody an opportunity to go work for them. They just keep raising the fees as if we're Placer County, Sacramento County, Marin County. And so what they did, the Board of Supervisors went along with Robert Bendorf, and they voted in retroactive raises where they bumped some people, according to Sheriff Durfer one day told me that some of his people that are now retired, in fact, people that got that raise that are still in the business got $1,000 raises a month. $1,000 to $2,000 raises a month that not only benefited them currently while employed, but they would take those raises into perpetuity until they assumed room temperature. So what kind of impact does that have on you? They think, oh, well, this is fair. Fair to whom? Fair means fair to everybody. You know, it's like when you hire an employee, you say, well, I hired this employee. Well, a lot took place when that happened. When you think of the intellectual exercise right there, that employee had to have the talents that you wanted, and you as a business had to have the benefits that the employee wanted, and he had to like you. You had to like him or her. And they had to like the salary, and you had to agree to how much, whoever suggested how much, who was going to get paid. There had to be an agreement there. And if you didn't like that agreement, you could go on and get a job somewhere else. Or if the person wanted more money, you could go look for an employee somewhere else. But the fact is that the owner of the business has to hire people and pay people a certain amount that will not cause them to go broke. Now, when you're running your own business, your concern is always what they call the bottom line. At the end of the month, do I have extra money? Do I have the same amount of money as I had last month left over? Or do I have less money? Or do I owe people money? And am I put some of my bills on my credit card? That's a bad sign. So here's what happened, and this is another complication for Yuba County. In the 90s, Gary Tyndall built a new jail, and he built enough beds in the jail to subcontract those beds out to the federal government. Before that time, Yuba County's taxes took care of all the sheriff's department and all the other departments. The taxes came in, they paid welfare, they paid public works, they paid all the administrators, the accounting staff, all the people out of the budget that came in from all the taxes that came towards the county. So, and they paid all the sheriff's deputies and the correctional officers in the jail. After Gary Tyndall started making millions of dollars from the federal government, instead of setting that money aside, the profits from housing federal immigration people, instead of putting that money aside for special projects or projects to improve the county or rainy day fund or whatever, the county then took those they said, you take those funds that are coming in from ICE or immigration and run your sheriff's department, and we're going to take all the money we used to pay you guys, and we're going to raise everybody else's salaries and use it for other stuff. So here's what we have right now. If ICE immigration decides, like in the sanctuary state, Bill 54, SB 54, if they decide at the state level that we're not going to be able in the counties to have any more immigration people in our jails, that removes $5 or $6 million from us. Now, if we weren't spending all that other money for other things that we used to be taking care of the sheriff's deputies and correctional officers with, that wouldn't be a big issue. It would be a loss. Sure, it would be a loss. But we'd still have money to pay for the sheriff's department because we always had money to pay for the sheriff's department, and we lived according to our means. But the combination of Gray Davis allowing people and the legislature to increase the amount of money you could retire on, like they gave law enforcement up to 3% times the number of years that they served. 3% times 30 equals 90% of their salary. When Gray Davis allowed the unions to prevail and they could get that much more money, Sutter and Yuba County both increased all their employees' salaries up to 35% retroactive to the time of employment. They basically broke the financial back of both counties, and they've been lying about it and hiding it and playing charades and using euphemistic terms like, well, the cost of business, we're bringing in more tax dollars, but the cost of business is going up. Whenever you use the cost of business is going up, that means is that commitment, that ripoff, where they self-dealt, including the administrators. The administrators, when there's negotiations with the unions, those administrators get raises from the supervisors, because what the supervisors say, well, we gave the head of welfare, we gave the head of health and human services, we gave the sheriff, we gave this person, we gave that person, we give all these people raises. So, by God, the county administrator needs to give a raise. He's running the thing. We need to be fair. I want to ask all these politicians, what is fair to the taxpayers? What's fair about any of this to the taxpayers when all of a sudden they've been paying their taxes faithfully? They've been shopping. They've been working their rear. They've been volunteering at Little League. They've been volunteering, being reserves at the sheriff's department. They've been doing this, all contributing their time, contributing their money to charitable organizations. And all of a sudden, they realize that in the county of Yuba, the very politicians that begged them to elect them has sunk them in debt to, if they had to settle up tomorrow, they would each have to come up with $15,000 per household and pay into CalPERS. Now, we haven't even started talking about the teachers union, which is CalSTRS. I'm making this very simple for you. If you are a taxpayer, if you live in Yuba and Sutter counties, actually, if you live in any of the counties that hear my voice, it's the same. This is a problem in every single county in California. These politicians and county administrators have self-dealt. It's no different than if you hire an employee, and you got a mom and pop grocery, you got a little quick stop, and you hire somebody, and they're pulling $20 and $30 out of the till every day. They're stealing from you. They're embezzling from you. That's exactly what the politicians and the county administrators and the city administrators did legally. They legally did it, but ethically, they ripped everybody off. And they, you know, and a guy once said to me, he's a recovered meth addict, and he said, you know, us meth addicts, we would steal from our friend his drugs, and then we'd help him look for the drugs the rest of the night. Let me just say that again. He said, as a meth addict, we would steal from each other and then help each other look for what I just stole from you. I'd help you look for it the rest of the night. That's exactly what the politicians have done to the taxpayers in California, county by county, and at every level, city, county, state. They have sold the taxpayers a lie and totally ripped them off. And then they show up at all these public events smiling at each other like, oh, yeah, we're all brothers and sisters and we love each other. We'll be right back.
I'm Dinesh D'Souza. 25 years ago, I stood in a courtroom in Washington, D.C., raised my arm, and took the oath of citizenship. That decision changed my life. All the things I've been able to do, be a writer, be a speaker, make movies, those things are possible for me only in America. In America, we are the architects of our own destiny. We are in the driver's seat of our own life. That's the American dream, the pursuit of happiness. Now, a couple of years ago, as many of you know, I also stood in a courtroom, this time in New York City, and heard a bailiff bark out, United States of America versus Dinesh D'Souza. And that's a feeling that I remember even now. It sends a chill down my spine. So I've seen the best of America and the worst of it. And although I've become increasingly skeptical of the U.S. government, my love for America, my enthusiasm for America, the country, remains undiminished. I celebrate every year enthusiastically the 4th of July, but for me, thinking back, the decision of taking the oath of citizenship all those many years ago, that was my Independence Day.
All right. You're listening to Live with Lou. We're into our third hour. We're going till noon, and then Bob Day will come on today. Hey, I just want to give a shout out and thanks to all the people that help us put this on. I got Leon here next to me today. He's helped me for the last few months run this show, and also Ted Holmes, a plumbing doctor, Greenwich Construction, and Church of Glad Tidings people out there help cover the time here. But also recently, a guy that's been a huge help is a guy named Chris Starkey with One Eye Blind Media. And Chris connected with me and said, you know, because we do the show live. So people say, hey, Lou, you know, I'd like to listen to the show sometime, but I'm not available on Saturdays, or I'd like to, is there a way I can get it recorded? And then when I drive in my car, I got to drive to San Francisco, or I'm flying somewhere, I can just listen to it at my convenience. And it was always, I'm not a techie person, so it was just like a big pain in the rear. And I could never get it on our website here at KMYC. Nobody would do that. So Chris stepped in, and he does some technology stuff on his own. It's a hobby of his, and he's created this YouTube channel called One Eye Blind Media, just like it sounds, all separate words with a space in between each word. One Eye Blind, not eyed, One Eye Blind Media. And if you go to YouTube and just put in One Eye Blind Media, and then once you get to that, on the front page, it has playlists, and you just click on playlists, and you can see things that Chris has created there, and various things he's interested in and he's offering for people to listen or watch. And so you can click on Lou, Live with Lou, and you can listen to any of the shows back as far as when he first started doing it, which is a couple of months. And you can listen to it at your convenience wherever you are in the world. So One Eye Blind Media, that's a part of the YouTube system, and that's his channel, One Eye Blind Media. And then click on playlists, okay? So for those that can't listen every week and really want to, I'm not trying to promote myself. I'm answering questions more than anything else. People saying, how can I, how do I, how, I want to, all that I need. I'm helping you today. So go check it out and enjoy yourself. Again, thanks, Chris, so much. He just does that out of the kindness of his heart, wants to help. I guess he likes the show. And I'm, some people hate it. Some people like it. That's America, right? So if you like this brand toilet paper and you don't like that brand, just buy the one you like, right? If you don't like this show, there's lots of other choices out there. Just get it on. And if we get down to just a handful of people liking this, I'll get it on somewhere else. Do something else with my time. Not a problem. Not insecure about it at all. So we've been talking about pensions. I want to make one final comment about pensions. And this political system that has evolved in America is incestuous. And it was said early on, and I can't quote you the founding father. I don't know whether it's Benjamin Franklin or one of the early founding fathers said, when a time comes, I'm paraphrasing it, when the time comes when people realize that they can vote themselves benefits or money from this system, it will be the beginning of the end. And that's exactly what's happened. Unions, including teachers' unions. You think, teachers' unions are all concerned about kids. No, you can actually YouTube top teachers' unions officials who say right in front of thousands of teachers, our interests are not kids, our interests are teachers. So the unions are interested in power and representing the people that they take dues from each month. And once the government allowed government employees to unionize, that was the beginning of the end of America. Because once the tipping point is reached on a high enough number of people that actually work for government, they will basically put private enterprise out of business, because they will take, it just seems like people are never, you ever eat chocolate or whatever your favorite food is, and you always want to eat a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, because even though you're full, it's just like, oh, that tastes so good. And it's like money. It's like, how much money is enough money for you? Well, it isn't about that. I want to make as much as I can. I just want to stack it up in the bank. Like Scott Mitnick. How much he make? $230-some thousand. It's interesting. I don't know whether I finished this thought with Danelle Stylos, when she had to sign the contract to work for community services, and she had to sign a contract to live in Sutter County. Darn, I bet she just hated that. She said, well, for $170,000 a year plus benefits, this, that, and the other thing, make about a couple $100,000 a year, I guess I'll sacrifice and live in this dastardly, terrible Sutter County. But then she lied, and the fascinating thing is she lied and got the fire chief of Sutter County to agree to say that that's where she lived. And then she lived in Sacramento. And now she's all in trouble. Now, the supervisors, the interesting thing is the supervisors were a part of that. They were accessories to the crime. Do you think anything's going to happen to them? Absolutely not. Nothing's going to happen to them. Even though they're liars, they knew she was living in it. They knew she wasn't living in this community. They're liars. They're deceitful. You like to be deceived? You like it when your kids lie to you? You like it when you do business with somebody and they deceive you? Claim they're going to pay you and they don't? They claim they're going to do this amount of work and they don't do good work? They deceive you? You like that? That's exactly what happened with Danelle Stylos' situation. Supervisors knew what she was doing. She signed a contract that was, she was not deceived. They told her what the agreement was. She agreed to it. And she cheated the taxpayers of Sutter County. She cheated the taxpayers. And then she lied on government paperwork numerous times and now got herself in trouble. And now the supervisors, they threw a big fit behind the scenes. How dare you arrest one of us? How dare, we're like the aristocrats in Sutter County. How dare you arrest one of us? You have no right. And so when Scott Mitnick came to town, it's like, though he had just been fired and disgraced in Thousand Oaks and actually ripped off the public, the taxpayers, it's amazing to me. Hey, does this bug you? This really got me. When I read the stories about Scott Mitnick, that he was arm twisting businesses that did business with Ventura County and Thousand Oaks in other words, they wanted to do business with the county, so he hit them up to donate money towards his kids' baseball team. Does it piss you off getting hit up to pay for people's kids when they should be? For you that are like 50, 60, 70 years old, did you pay for your own kids to go to camp and go to Little League and play football? What's up with all these people starting GoFundMe accounts and hitting you up for putting their kids in camp? It's like, hey, they had sex. They produced the kid. And now they want it. It's just this, it's amazing to me how much us conservatives and church people think, oh, yeah, we're all like, we take care of our own business. We got the same entitlement mentality. We're welfare babes. We'll hit up fellow church people. Oh, help my kid go to camp. Help my kid go to this. Help my kid go to that. I said, take care. Why don't your kid work? Why don't you teach your kid how to work, get a job, and go out there and bust his butt, and then he'll really appreciate like going to that camp or going to that. And so I was amazed at how much Scott Mitnick, here a guy's making $200,000 or $300,000 a year, right? And he's got to go out and sell instead of his kids selling the sponsorships for the baseball team, he's got to do it. And he does it on taxpayer time. And he's making a couple $100,000 a year. And he can't why don't you just fund the dang team? Is that amazing to you? Rich people just can't, they're never rich enough. Have you ever noticed that? The Bible warned about that. It doesn't say money is the root of all evil. It said the love of money is the root of all evil. Here's what supervisors did. They weren't happy enough with giving all these, it's like my friend Bob Fischetti when he's out here helping me do this show for years. Bob told about working for a retail establishment. I can't remember what it was, a clothing store or something once upon a time. And some people got caught that were working for the store, and I don't know whether they were like giving away clothes they were undercharging their friends for clothes. And so basically they got caught embezzling. So Bob questioned one guy one day, he said, about like, why didn't he do something about it? And it turned out that this other guy had his hand in the till as well. Like, why wouldn't you turn your friend if you knew this guy knew that this other employee knew that these other employees were ripping off this clothing store? And Bob said, well, why wouldn't you do that? He said, well, actually, I was involved as well. Here's the problem. The supervisors who gave all these fantastic raises then turned around and they vote them, just like Congress can do the same thing. And just like the state of California, the Assembly and Senate do the same thing. They vote themselves raises. They look in the mirror and they say, man, you are good. You were so smart. You were such a good-looking guy. What would this state, this county, this city do without you? It'd probably just totally fall apart. And so therefore, I have concluded I'm going to give you a raise, you being me, the guy in the mirror. I'm going to give you a big old raise. And so the supervisors of Yuba County gave themselves almost a 50% raise. They gave them 2 sets of raises. This is all prior to the economy. Now, isn't it amazing how politicians, in fact, all of us have this tendency, you take credit when things are really going good, but you don't want to take credit when things hit the fan, right? So when all this big boom and there were thousands of houses being built out in South Yuba County and there was money flying everywhere, the supervisors, their chests got big and their head got big. And they had to go get bigger chairs because Mary Jane Griego's butt got wider and John Nicoletti's belly got wider, and they had to go get bigger chairs so they all could fit in there, and then they could rock and they could muse and they could act really aristocratic as the small people came way down below them, walked in and had to sit and bow before them and wait for their chance to speak and then get cut off because they spoke more than 3 minutes or something. And so they gave themselves these fantastic raises that, when the economy collapsed and they had to go and they had to lay people off from the county, the supervisors could have reduced their pay if they really were concerned about their fellow employees, that they always say my employees, our employees, we love our county, we love you, we love you, we just love you, we appreciate you. Do you think they took a cut in pay? Like reduce their pay back to what they got before the crash in order to keep some of those workers and serving the public? They're concerned. We're public servants. Oh, yeah, by God, we're going to make sure our constituents are cared. Yeah, you come first. You come first. You think they cut their pay? No way they did. They didn't cut their per diem. The per diem like their tuna sandwich money just because they don't, we don't expect them to pay any money out of their pocket being a supervisor, running around town spending their own gas, even though it's public service. No, they get their pay, then they get their insurance, and then they get their gas money and all that kind of stuff. Those Yuba County supervisors, for all you that are living on that per capita, per household income, about $35,000 a year out there, supervisors are so smart and so talented that they get $80,000 a year. And there's no qualifications. All you have to do is get enough votes. So that's what's happened here. When things were good and they thought, the Bible's such a fascinating book. It just kind of tells it like it is. And if you pay attention to it, it helps you. It says, do not presume upon the future. It says, check the ant out. You ever watch ants? You know anything about ants? It says in Proverbs, hey, behold the ant. Well, what's up with the ant? Well, the ant, it like harvest, and harvest time, it really gets it on. Not like a lot of Americans that sleep around, right, during harvest time, and it's too hot to work out there, right? It's that harvest, and then in the wintertime, or when times of famine, when things are tough, they have plenty of food to eat. So you'd think when there's a windfall in the county, they would put money aside for a rainy day, knowing that times could get lean. You'd think you would know that since you're a very, very bright supervisor and so successful in life. You're just such a smart guy and gal. But instead of putting money aside for a rainy day and keeping salaries low so you don't have to lay off people, here's the other thing. I learned this from Dr. Cassidy. He said, you know these people, Lou, that work for the county, and they say, oh, yeah, we're all committed. We're union brothers. We love each other. They gave the unions a chance to do two things. One of two things when they said, either we're going to have to lay off employees, or you can all take a little bit of cut in pay and keep all our employees and keep serving the public and keep providing a high level of service, and we could all earn a little bit less, or we could lay off all the new hires, even though they might be smarter than the old farts, and you wouldn't have to take a cut in pay, but we'd have to lay off a bunch of people. You know what they chose? Do you think they chose to serve the public? Do you think they chose to sacrifice? Do you think they chose to not see their new fellow employees lose their job completely? You know what they did? They said, to hell with those new people. That's what Yuba County employees said. They said, to hell with those people. We're keeping our salary. You know, that's what I appreciate about Sheriff Durfer. When they had to cut back in the sheriff's department, he said, you know, I'm going to do my very best that no one gets laid off. But what that means is I may have to move you around. So if you're used to being a dispatcher and somebody retires or dies or moves to another county and we have an opening over there and I need that position filled, I may have to transfer you to another department, but I'll keep you hired. I like that. And as far as I know, he didn't actually cut any staff. He just moved them around to fill positions, and he didn't refill new positions with new employees. He kept moving people around to keep the spots filled. But it's interesting, you know, you really learn a lot about people when money gets tight. I used to work with Russell and Bowles Painting. I worked in their office for years. And, man, when the business was bustling and contractors were making money, it's just like, oh, we love you guys. We did great painter. We had great painters. We did great production work. We always made it. All our work was really sharp looking, right? We made it right. Quality work. They're still doing great work today. But anyway, back in the day, we were making all kinds, you know, we had all kinds of work. Man, there were subdivisions, apartments being built. It was going. Everybody rush to get it done yesterday. And so we got paid. And then when the economy started to turn, and contractors that always claimed that they were so honest and reputable and stuff, and money was a little tight, they didn't pay us. And they made excuses. Like, oh, we didn't do the job right or something. But we always did the job right. You always find out people's character when all hell breaks loose, not in the good times. When there isn't enough money to go around, will they actually pay you? When there isn't enough go around, will you kick your fellow employees to the curb, or will you take a cut in pay so everybody has enough to get by? When the supervisors raise their pay because they're brilliant and they cause this huge boom in housing in Yuba County, well, are they willing to cut their pay when the crap hits the fan? Will they accept their responsibility? No, they're not going to. They only accept responsibility when something great happens. Then they take credit for it. And what's happening is, if they're honest, they incestuously ripped off the taxpayers in both counties, and what I'm finding in all the counties, if you go down to other counties like Marin County, people did the same thing. Isn't it amazing? It's amazing to me. We're public employees. We're really concerned about our county, our city. Why aren't they concerned about it for when they leave? Why aren't they concerned that they leave it better than when they found it? Why aren't they concerned that their fantastic amount they're making per year, $180,000 or $200,000 or $140,000 or $130,000 or $250,000 a year they're going to earn till they drop dead, is going to bankrupt the county? They're not concerned about that. To hell with the county. To hell with the city. Do you think Scott Mitnick cares a rip about Sutter County? Come on, man. Are you clueless over there in Sutter County? He's a hireling. You know what Jesus said? You guys ought to read the Bible. Look up hireling and read Jesus' views on hirelings. As soon as things get tough, they run. The hireling, when he's protecting the sheep, as soon as the wolves show up, the sucker says, screw the sheep, I'm out of here. That would be a hireling. That's what you hired when you brought a dude out of Ventura that won't even come up here and live. That's what you do when you hired Danelle Stylos and then all got in on the lie, the big lie. It's just like, oh, Well, the public has to tell the truth, all the truth, nothing but the truth, so help them God. But we're running the thing. That doesn't apply to us. We can lie, cheat, and steal, rip the public off because we're the bosses. And all the rest of the folks are just plantation hands. We'll be coming right back for another 30 minutes in just a sec.
Venezuela used to be the richest country in Latin America, but now it's falling apart. If you've turned on the news lately, you've probably seen stories about protests, food shortages, and massive inflation. So how did Venezuela go from this to this? Venezuela has the world's largest oil reserves, and oil exports make up over 95% of the country's income. Meaning, if it doesn't sell oil, there's no money to spend. On top of that, Venezuela hasn't been taking good care of its oil facilities, and the state-run oil company hasn't paid its subsidiaries. So these companies started producing less oil, a lot less. The oil price has also plummeted, which leads us to the next problem: how Venezuela uses its money. Protesters claim Nicolas Maduro and his predecessor Hugo Chavez ran the country to the ground. In 1998, Chavez launched a political revolution with a new constitution and socialist economic and social policies, all boosted by high oil prices. He started redistributing land and wealth. He nationalized oil, finance, agricultural, and industrial companies. He fixed prices and devalued the exchange rate with the US dollar. These policies helped a lot of people, but with less money coming in, the system collapsed by the time Maduro took over. Now the country's down to its last $10 billion, of which $7.7 billion are in gold and can't be spent in a hurry. And it owes roughly $7.2 billion in outstanding debt this year. Because of all this, the country's currency, the bolivar, has lost 99% of its value in the past 5 years. So for example, $100 of currency in 2012 would be worth just 20 cents in 2017. Inflation reached an all-time high with 800% in December 2016, and the IMF estimates it will go up all the way to 1,134%. Let me visualize that. That means that a liter of milk that may have cost $1 before could end up costing roughly $11 by the end of this year. In a country where 80% of people live in poverty, that's just not affordable. And it makes things especially hard if you're a country that gets most of its food from abroad. Food and supplies have become so scarce as a result of inflation and price controls, they're being sold on the black market instead of in stores. With a large part of the country on the brink of starvation, food trafficking has become the biggest business in Venezuela. So Maduro put the military in charge of managing the country's food supply. But an AP investigation found that the military runs its own black markets and takes bribes from food importers. To be fair, there were shortages under Chavez too, but under Maduro, they became even greater. So great, in fact, that 3/4 of Venezuela's adult population lost an average of 8.7 kilos in the past year. People also have trouble getting their hands on life-saving medical supplies. The country is lacking roughly 80% of basic medical supplies, leading to drastic consequences. Venezuela is in the middle of a vicious cycle of bad policies and worse luck. It's been at the top of the World Misery Index for 3 consecutive years. So then, why is Maduro still in power? Venezuela's poorest haven't taken to the streets so far. They're afraid to lose some of the benefits they gained under Chavez. And Maduro's support base goes beyond just the poor. He has the military on his side because he's been keeping them happy by providing jobs, food, and basic supplies. Empowered by the support, he's been accusing the opposition of encouraging violence and training children for terrorist groups, which is what he likes to call the protesters. Now, he wants to create a popular assembly that can rewrite the constitution, and he declared a state of emergency. The opposition is afraid the assembly will be entirely made up of pro-Maduro parties, so they're calling for new elections and Maduro's resignation. Since April 1st, 2017, 67 people have died in the protests, hundreds have been injured, and thousands arrested. Mediating the standoff will be a tough mission, even for the Pope.
All right, welcome back. We got a few minutes left here. We're going to noon. And for those out in Olivehurst and Linda, you can start thinking about getting up now. And I want to mention talk about gasoline for a second. I saw President Trump made a comment about gas prices. He said are the lowest. At least this is what he was quoted as saying. Actually, he said he tweeted this. Gas prices are lowest in the U.S. in over 10 years. I'd like to see them go even lower. Actually, if we look at the years that when Obama started, I think when the Bush-Obama transition took place, I think the gas price in our area here was, Yuba Sutter was about $1.86. So I think Trump overshot it a bit. AAA says that this last Monday, that the national average of gas was $2.23. Now that's saying something because California, usually we're about $1 higher. If you fly into New Mexico today from here, like Albuquerque, you're going to see gas $1 cheaper. It isn't because they are loaded with oil there. It's just because California, we have more oil than anybody around the United States, but we won't allow the producers to go get it. And we force a special type of gasoline to be produced that's more expensive, and we really tax it big time to spend money on other programs, not roads. So our gas runs about $1 or more than the cheaper states. So the reason I bring it up is I ran into a friend of mine that I met in juvenile hall years ago, and now he is a 35-year-old dad of 4, married guy who owns a house in Olivehurst. He was raised by an alcoholic father, no mother. And he used to come to juvenile hall because he'd beat up kids and take their clothes because he didn't have any. He didn't have nice clothes. So if he saw something he needed, he'd take it. So he ended up, I don't know if he made it to prison. He did make it to California Youth Authority, but he's doing well now. And I was talking to him the other day. I ran into him and I was saying, where you been working? He said, I've been working in Texas. And he usually works for a company that works here and in Nevada, and they support oil well drilling. So I said, where? He said, Odessa, Texas, right in the middle of Texas. And he said, you wouldn't believe it, Lou. He said, they fly me down there. And he said, my boys in the All-Stars, they're traveling in the All-Stars, so they allowed me to take some time off to fly back and set in on his games. But he said, where we're working, he said, there's oil wells as far as the eye can see, and they're drilling more and more and more. He said you can look at the horizon, and in any direction, 360 degrees, you can see rigs and new wells going down. And then if you drive to that horizon, and then there's another horizon, and you'll see the same number of rigs. He said it's unbelievable. So let me just tell you a little bit about oil. When we started this show about 5 years ago, we had a guy that's the president of Breitling Oil. His PR person called me, and I was shocked. Like, why me? I'm a nobody in this small town doing this little radio show, and they wanted me to interview the president of Breitling Oil. You can look it up on the internet. It's a big energy company in Texas, Breitling Oil, Breitling. And so we talked on the phone, and we interviewed him, played it on the radio. It was a very good interview, and he talked about the fact right in the middle of where Obama said we're running out of oil, and Stephen Chu, the head of the Department of Energy, said we're going to have to get the price of gasoline up to about $9 a gallon to force people into electric cars because there's not enough fossil fuels to hang for hardly any time. And basically, this head of Breitling Oil says, that's not true, and that if they would allow us to explore oil and natural gas, etc., we can actually, remember, we were right in the middle of a recession when Obama took over. He said we can work our way out of this recession just by hiring people in the oil and gas industry. Well, the president of the United States was 100% wrong, and the president of Breitling Oil was 100% correct, because they, at that time, in Williston, North Dakota, where what they call the Bakken Shelf, which they had a huge oil find there, and they had so many jobs that they were begging people. They were giving people signing bonuses to even work at Walmart and McDonald's and to drive propane trucks. They had a shortage of workers in a big way, in every way. And you could drive up there from being in poverty and out of a job here, and you could get a job up there. So basically what the President Breitling Oil said came to pass, in spite of Obama, who wouldn't allow any drilling on federal lands. And so the drilling in North Dakota was on state and private lands. So here's something that most people don't know. Under Democrat presidents, they usually overregulate and shut down businesses. So that happened during the Jimmy Carter years. Many of you probably weren't alive, but in the 1970s, I took a road trip with a guy, and we were trying to get across the United States by car because he needed to speak a few places. And we got to San Antonio, Texas, late one night, and we couldn't buy any gasoline. Now, this is an amazing thing. United States, it has more energy than anybody in the world. They were shutting down gas stations throughout the country because not of a shortage. They called it a shortage, but because of politics. And so we had lines going blocks, and sometimes you could only buy 5 gallons of gas, 10 gallons of gas. Anyway, it was a fiasco. At that time, the United States of America forbid, this is how you say, well, this is free enterprise. This is like capitalism. No, it really isn't. It's managed free enterprise, overregulated free enterprise, because the United States government in the 1970s, they created a huge stockpile of oil, a strategic stockpile in case there was ever, because they thought they were going to run out of oil in this country. And they thought, wow, if we run out of oil, we're going to be weak militarily, and we won't be able to defend ourselves. So they started a stockpile of oil, and they forbid oil companies from selling oil outside the United States. Can you imagine that? If whatever you sell, whether you're selling walnuts, peaches, you're selling shirts, whatever you're selling, if they forbid you to sell to certain people, well, you can sell to Marysville, but you can't sell to Yuba City. You can sell to California, but you can't sell in Nevada or Colorado. That's exactly what the United States of America did to the oil companies that were basically, these companies are international companies. And they said, you can sell the oil that you find here, but you cannot sell it anywhere else. And it was all the basis of ignorance that decision was made. They thought we were going to run out of oil. They just were ignorant. It's kind of like thinking that the sun goes around the earth. Ignorance. But that ignorance dictated public policy for the next almost 50 years. Until Donald Trump came along and now has proclaimed that oil companies can sell oil and gas to other countries. Well, that has opened up not only the ability to make a lot more money, and therefore it's better for the economy of the United States government, because if they're making money, they're paying more taxes. If they're selling more oil, they're hiring more people that are also paying taxes and buying houses and buying cars and buying food and buying clothes, flying here, flying there. And so for the first time, you think, well, what benefit? I hate Trump. I hate him. I don't like his personality. He said this. He said that. I don't like the way he eats chicken. I don't like the way his hair looks. He's this. He's that. He's a beast. He's that. He hates women. Da da da. The fact is, day by day, he is taking the government off the backs of business. And you think, oh, he's just benefiting rich people. No, listen, if business doesn't survive, neither will you if you're out there working somewhere. Whether you're working for the government or whether you're an employee at a business, if regulations kill business, everybody loses. When Robert Bendorf and the county administrator of Yuba County had to lay off a bunch of workers in 2008 and 9, the reason he did that was because the money quit coming into the coffers of Yuba County from taxes and fees. So I'll tell you, county workers should not just think they have a payday every day. They should thank business, private business, every day they get up in the morning. They should thank God and thank you, Jesus, for all the private enterprises that are keeping me in a job today. In fact, if you work for private enterprise, you should get up, thank God, and then thank your employer that he doesn't go stupid or have an affair or get on drugs or do something really weird or get killed in a traffic accident, because you may lose your job. So Trump's saying he's hoping gas prices go down. I do too. I bought gas the other day. I think I paid a little over $2.23 for it. But to me, we could use all the help we can get in California with cheaper gas prices. But the problem is and I don't know what to do about it except have a state of Jefferson, because whatever we do up in Northern California doesn't do much down there in Southern California, because down there in Southern California, they keep voting for stupid stuff. They keep voting people into power that want to start a sanctuary state, or want to have separate or let transsexuals into girls' bathrooms, or they want to stop all oil drilling, or they want to stop railroads from going through communities because they're hauling oil, or they want to stop, for instance, I don't know how they were comparing here the other day how many years it took to build a Golden Gate Bridge. Was it 4 years? And I think they've started a desalination plant in San Diego because all along the ocean, all along California, we had the ocean. So when we're short of water in California, we're staring and looking at the ocean. So it's like, what's wrong with like taking the salt out of that water? Mexico's doing it as well. So, and there's a possibility if America doesn't permit more desalination plants, Mexico will be selling the southern U.S. water. Isn't that amazing? Because Mexico didn't have to put up with all that regulation crap. You know how long it took the desalination plant in San Diego to get permitted and get up and running? Where we built things like the Hoover Dam, Golden Gate Bridge in a couple of years, Empire State Building. I think the Empire State Building went up in a year. You know how many years it took that desalination plant from the time of the concept, permitting, to get built and fight all the lawsuits? 18 years. You think there isn't stupidity? You know, Trump discussed the limitations on building an 18-mile roadway in some state back east here recently, where they had to go through something like 56 different agencies, fees, and steps to get this thing built. No wonder we can't fix the infrastructure of this country. We got a few minutes left. I want to wrap up with talking about a situation that is so symptomatic, yet politicians are so blinded because they're in love with themselves, and bureaucrats in our two Yuba Sutter counties. If you're here listening from Placer, Nevada, Butte, you have the same exact problems. I just don't know the people's names up there. But my friend Kumar Kairam at Washington Avenue Market, who has one of these convenience store markets, a neighborhood market, people drop in buy the incidental items. In 2005, he changed his liquor license. He had a liquor license when he bought the place, but he changed it some. And when the permit came through Yuba City to get final approval from the Alcohol Beverage Control in Sacramento, they put a couple conditions on his license. In other words, government telling you, government tells liquor stores what time they get to open, what time they get to close, whether they can sell this or that or the other thing, or whether they're going to require them to pay more money or not for special permits. You just can't get a liquor permit and sell liquor. You got to have a permit. If you sell this, you pay this amount. If you sell this, you sell all this. It's like getting a driver's license. If you get this kind of license, you can drive this. And if you want to drive this, and you got to have a special license, drive this, you got to have a special license. So they put a condition, not based upon that this market had misbehaved, not based upon that this guy had a criminal background. They put a condition that he could not sell a single 16-ounce beer, and he couldn't sell bottles of wine under a certain amount of ounces. And it's really hurt his business. Now, the interesting thing is, just the other day, as a result of Liz Cervantes in Sutter County filing a Freedom of Information request of the city police, wanting to know how many police interactions there were at each of these small convenience stores in the community. As a result of filing for that, the city knew darn good and well that they were biased and playing favoritism, particularly Darren Gale, that he wanted to put extra restrictions on this guy for no reason at all, but he could and he would. And then he had the arrogance to say, well, it doesn't really hurt your business. The very fact that a government official has the gall and the blindness to make an arrogant statement like that to a guy that lives and breathes that business and trying to put 3 kids through college is kind of stifling to me. It's a mind blower to me. A guy that probably has never run a private enterprise in his life says to a businessman, well, it doesn't make any difference whether you sell 16-ounce single beers or not. He has no idea what he's even talking about. This is a problem, the blindness and arrogance and power, the intoxication of the power of being able to have people have to run over your king of the hill. They have to knock you off king of the hill to get anything done. All the steps and procedures you have to go through to even start a business or get permission. Can I, may I, please, could I, would you consider, thank you very much. Oh, I really thank you guys. We shouldn't even have to thank the government for jack. They are simply in the way constantly of people trying to hire people, pay people, take care of people, sell products in our community. And so after this Freedom of Information Act request went in and they had to provide all this information, my friend Kumar was contacted by the city and they asked if he would go down to the alcohol beverage control and reapply for a new business license, new liquor license, and request from them that the restrictions be removed, which then again would be submitted to the city for their blessing that those restrictions be removed. Now, we'll see whether in the next 30, 60, or 90 days, whether the city keeps their hands off Kumar's business finally. The reason I've talked about this over and over is because it's symptomatic and symbolic of what private enterprise has to face at every level of government day after day after day. Billions of dollars in paperwork, huge amounts of time, losses of money, the fact that you can't open before a certain hour, you got to close before a certain hour. Even the recent move to raise the minimum wage, eventually up to $15 per hour, that's going to create more and more poverty in our communities. And now I just read an article about McDonald's. And if you've driven, I don't know about the Yuba City McDonald's, but if you've driven by the Marysville McDonald's, they're doing an entire rebuild on that building. And my hunch is when they open it back up, you're not going to have people taking your orders. They will have removed them, and they will replace them with kiosks, where all you will do is go in, and you will press on the screen and tap what your order is. It will kick you out a number and your receipt. You can pay, and then they will bring your order right to you at your table. And you've eliminated a starter job for a young teen or someone who's starting out with some minimal skills so they can get some skills. You've eliminated that job, and you've replaced them with an electronic kiosk. That's what's happening here. And it's so hypocritical to me that politicians continually vote for increases in the minimum wage. Either they're too stupid to figure it out, or they know exactly what they're doing, but the people are too stupid to figure out. They think politicians did us a solid by forcing businesses to give us a higher wage, when really what happens is that people get laid off, less people work, more mechanization, and more people earn less money. That's just the way it is. So if you'll notice the McDonald's, I'm anxious to see. I didn't know what was going on, what they were doing. I thought maybe they're just I think they're increasing their dining area. But I thought McDonald's was kind of struggling, but the article I read was that they're booming, and they're having a renewal in McDonald's, and they're going to all these kiosks, and should be good. I'm happy for them. But politicians are continuing to try to destroy private enterprise. In other words, folks, I was talking to a friend yesterday, John Missler, and he said when he was supervisor, I can't remember whether he told me he was meeting with the public works people or building inspection or planning, but he was saying that if it was up to him, everyone working for the government would have to at least work 5 years for private enterprise. I wish we could make that happen. I wish that any politician that ran for office would have to work in private enterprise for a certain number of years, because they have no clue, and they keep passing rules and regulations that make it worse and worse and worse to be in business. Donald Trump said when he was meeting, I don't know whether this right before he was elected, he was meeting with the Carrier air conditioning people, and they basically told him that the reason they were moving to Mexico wasn't so much unions and high wages, is just because of government harassment and regulation. And if Trump can shrink regulation in this country, he will cause business to really flourish. So watch for Kumar Kairam to once and for all get his freedom back. It wasn't about a 16-ounce beer, but it's his freedom to make a living and to choose what he wants to do. We'll see you next week. Have a good time.